There's a red car that appears in nightmares. A simple red Fiat, the kind you'd see 100 times driving through any Argentine city. Unremarkable. Forgettable. Except that on April 3rd, 2002, this particular red car stopped beside a young woman walking down a street in San Miguel de Tucumán, and when it drove away, she was gone. Her name was María de los Ángeles Verón. Everyone called her Marita. She was 23 years old. She was a mother to a 2-year-old daughter named Micaela. She was wearing a turquoise shirt, blue jeans, and old white sneakers. She told her mother she'd be back within the hour. That was over 22 years ago. Marita Verón has never been found. But here's what makes this case different from thousands of other missing person cases. Here's what transformed it from a personal tragedy into a national reckoning. It wasn't just that Marita disappeared. It was that when her mother went looking for her, she discovered an entire criminal infrastructure that everyone knew about but nobody talked about. Police who protected traffickers instead of victims. Judges who took bribes. Politicians who looked the other way. And underneath it all, a network of brothels disguised as bars where young women were held captive, drugged, beaten, and sold. Marita Verón's disappearance exposed a system of human trafficking so entrenched in Argentine society that it took a mother's obsessive, dangerous, decade-long investigation to force people to acknowledge it existed. The question isn't just what happened to Marita Verón. The question is how many other women disappeared into the same darkness, and how a democracy could allow it to happen in plain sight. This is a story about one woman who was taken, and about another woman, her mother, who refused to let her vanish quietly. María de los Ángeles Verón was born into a working-class family in Tucumán province, in the northwest of Argentina. Her parents, Susana Trimarco and Daniel Verón, raised her alongside her brother Horacio in a modest neighborhood called Las Talitas. By all accounts, it was a normal childhood: school, friends, family dinners, the kind of life that doesn't make headlines, which is exactly what most people want. Marita was known as warm, caring, someone people felt comfortable confiding in. She had that quality some people possess naturally, where they make you feel heard. She wasn't flamboyant or attention-seeking. She was just present, genuinely interested in the people around her. In her late teens, Marita met David Catalan. They fell in love the way young people do, with intensity and certainty. When Marita became pregnant at 21, there was no crisis, no drama. She and David welcomed their daughter Micaela with joy. Marita embraced motherhood completely. She was attentive, protective, devoted. Friends remember seeing her with Micaela, the way she'd look at her daughter, the careful way she'd brush the child's hair. But the relationship with David didn't last. These things happen, especially when you're young and trying to figure out who you are while raising a child. They separated, and Marita moved back in with her parents. It wasn't ideal, but it was practical. Susana and Daniel helped with Micaela, and Marita had the support she needed. At 23, Marita was trying to build a life. She was thinking about the future, about what came next. She was considering her options for birth control, which is how she ended up talking to Patricia Soria, a nurse who lived in the same neighborhood. This is where things get murky. This is where the story starts to twist. Patricia Soria was friendly, helpful, perhaps a little too interested in Marita's personal life. She asked questions, lots of questions, about her routines, about her relationship status. At the time, it probably seemed like normal conversation, maybe slightly nosy, but nothing alarming. Soria insisted that Marita should go to the maternidad clinic to get an IUD. She kept bringing it up, kept pushing. Susana Trimarco, Merita's mother, didn't like Patricia Soria. She couldn't articulate exactly why, just a feeling. The way Soria asked so many personal questions, the way she seemed overly invested in Marita's business. But what do you do with a feeling like that? How do you tell your adult daughter not to trust someone based on a vague sense of unease? Then there was Miguel Ardiles, supposedly an employee at the maternidad clinic. He helped arrange Marita's appointment. On the afternoon of April 2nd, someone from the clinic called Marita and told her to come in the next day at 3 o'clock. They told her to bring her DNI, her national identity card. This was the document required for hospital admissions, for banking procedures, for travel. It was essential. You didn't leave home without it. Susana Trimarco remembered this detail later. It seemed unusual. Why specifically tell her to bring her ID for a routine appointment? But at the time, it was just another detail, unremarkable in the moment, only gaining significance in retrospect. The morning of April 3, 2002 was ordinary. Marita had breakfast with her mother. They talked about normal things, the kind of conversation that evaporates from memory because there's nothing special about it. Marita played with Micaela for a while. Then, around mid-morning, she got ready to leave for her appointment. She wore a turquoise shirt, blue jeans, old white sneakers comfortable for walking. She kissed her daughter goodbye. She looked at her mother and said something that would echo for decades. "Don't worry, I'll be back soon." And she walked out the door. To understand what happened next, you have to understand Tucumán in 2002. You have to understand the geography, the economy, the shadows. San Miguel de Tucumán is the capital of Tucumán province, located in northwestern Argentina. It's Argentina's fifth largest city, but that designation obscures the reality of deep poverty in the surrounding areas. This is sugarcane country, agricultural land where wealth concentrates in the hands of a few while thousands struggle. The economic crisis that devastated Argentina in 2001 hit places like Tucumán especially hard. Jobs disappeared, opportunities dried up, desperation became the prevailing mood. And in that desperation, predators found opportunity. Northwestern Argentina, particularly the provinces of Tucumán, La Rioja, Salta, and Jujuy, had become a corridor for human trafficking. Young women and girls were recruited, deceived, or outright kidnapped and forced into prostitution. The method varied. Sometimes it was a false job offer. Come work at this restaurant, this hotel, this legitimate business. You'll make good money. Then the woman would arrive to find herself locked in a brothel, beaten, raped, and told she now owed money for her transportation and room and board. She had to work off the debt. Of course, the debt never decreased. It only grew. Other times, the approach was more direct. A woman would be approached by someone claiming to have work, or she'd be drugged at a party, or like Marita, she'd be grabbed off the street in broad daylight. The brothels masqueraded as legitimate businesses. They called themselves whiskerias, whiskey bars, or sometimes cabarets. From the outside, they looked like ordinary bars or nightclubs. Inside, they were prisons. Women were kept under guard, often drugged to make them compliant, beaten if they resisted. Some were teenagers, children really, sold by family members desperate for money, or kidnapped from their homes. And the system was protected. Police officers were paid to look the other way. Some were regular customers. Others actively participated, returning escaped women to their captors. Politicians received campaign contributions from the brothel owners. Judges accepted bribes. The corruption went so deep that attempting to report a trafficking case to police might result in the victim being taken directly back to the brothel. This was the world Marita Verón walked into on April 3, 2002. The timeline of that day is pieced together from witness statements, some more reliable than others. Some witnesses came forward immediately. Others waited years, afraid of retaliation. Some never came forward at all, too terrified to speak. Marita left her house sometime around mid-morning, walking toward the area where she expected to catch a bus or taxi to the Maternidad clinic. Las Tolitas is a suburban area, residential, the kind of neighborhood where people know each other, where someone walking down the street isn't unusual, where a woman in a turquoise shirt and old sneakers wouldn't attract particular attention. Except that someone was watching. A witness, a neighbor, saw a red Fiat car stop beside Marita as she walked. The witness saw men get out of the car. The witness saw them grab Marita and force her inside the vehicle. Then the car drove away. This witness came forward, but when pressed for details, when asked to testify officially, the witness became vague, uncertain, afraid, the specifics blurred. Later, this witness refused to say more. The fear was palpable. A carpenter working in the area also saw something. He reported his sighting to Susana Tramarco, provided some details about what he'd witnessed. Then he vanished. Completely. As if the earth had swallowed him, in Susana's words. He was never heard from again. Was he killed? Did he flee? Was he paid off? No one knows. The red car had a logo on it. 5 estrellas, 5 stars. It was a taxi company. But not a legitimate taxi picking up a passenger. This was a vehicle used for kidnapping, owned by people connected to the trafficking network, driven by men who knew exactly what they were doing. By the time the sun set on April 3rd, Marita Verón had disappeared. But the truly horrifying part is what happened next. Or rather, What almost happened next? 3 days later, on April 6th, police in an area called La Ramada, about 30 kilometers from where Marita was taken, found a young woman. She was disoriented, clearly distressed. She was wearing high-heeled shoes, not sneakers. Witnesses later said it appeared she had escaped from a sex party, one of those gatherings where trafficked women were brought to service wealthy clients. The police spoke with her. They knew something was wrong. They could see she needed help. They could have taken her to a hospital, to a police station, anywhere safe. Instead, they put her on a bus, heading toward Tucumán. And she never arrived. Think about that. Police officers found what appeared to be a trafficking victim, a woman who had just escaped from captivity, and rather than protecting her, they sent her away on a bus. Alone. Vulnerable. And she vanished again. Was this woman Marita Verón? The timing fits. The location fits. The circumstances fit. But without definitive identification, we can't be certain. What we can be certain of is this. If it was Marita, the police had a chance to save her and failed. If it wasn't Marita, then some other woman was re-trafficked because police didn't do their jobs. Either way, it's a damning indictment of the system. Back in Los Tolidos, Susana Trimarco was frantic. Her daughter had left for a doctor's appointment and never returned. An hour passed. Then 2 hours. Then it was evening, and Marita still wasn't home. Susana called Marita's friends. She called David, Marita's ex-partner. She checked with neighbors. No one had seen her. She went to the police to file a missing person report, and the police told her to wait. Girls this age, they said, they run off with boyfriends. They go to parties and lose track of time. Give it a few days. She'll turn up. Susana insisted something was wrong. Marita wouldn't just leave. Not without calling. Not without letting someone know. She had a daughter. She was responsible. This wasn't like her. The police were dismissive. Come back in a few days if she doesn't show up. So Susana and her husband Daniel did what police should have done. They started searching. They went to hospitals asking if anyone matching Marita's description had been admitted. They spoke with neighbors, trying to find witnesses. They walked the streets, showing Marita's photo to anyone who would look. 3 weeks after Marita disappeared, a woman who worked in prostitution approached Marita's parents with information. She told them she had been sold to traffickers. She told them about brothels in La Rioja, a province west of Tucumán. She told them about networks that moved women between locations, keeping them drugged and controlled. She told them she had heard rumors about a new girl matching Marita's description. This was the moment when Susana Trimarco's life split in two. Before, when she was just a mother whose daughter was missing. And after, when she became a one-woman investigative force against an entire criminal infrastructure. With little support from police, Susana and Daniel began their own investigation. They obtained names of known traffickers from police files, information that should have been confidential but that sympathetic officers quietly provided. They learned about the brothel network in La Rioja. They learned the names of the establishments: Candy, El Candilejas, El Desafío, and Susana decided to go there herself. She dressed to look the part. She put on makeup, styled her hair, wore clothes that would make her blend in. She pretended to be a former sex worker now working as a recruiter, someone interested in buying young women to work in other locations. It was an incredibly dangerous gambit. If the traffickers discovered who she really was, she could be killed. Easily. Quietly. But Susana didn't care about the danger. Her daughter was somewhere in this network, and she was going to find her. The investigation Susana and Daniel conducted uncovered enough evidence that police couldn't ignore it anymore. In late 2002, raids were conducted on brothels in La Rioja. The suspected establishments, Candy, El Candilejas, and El Desafío, were shut down. Women were freed. And some of those women had information about Marita Verón. One woman specifically said she had seen Marita at Candy. She described Marita's appearance in detail, said Marita's hair had been dyed, that she was wearing blue contact lenses, that she looked drugged and disoriented. But by the time the raid happened, Marita had been moved. The traffickers were always moving their victims, rotating them between locations to prevent anyone from forming attachments or making escape plans. Another freed woman described the conditions inside these places: the beatings, the drugs, particularly cocaine, which was given to the women to keep them working longer hours, to numb them to what was happening, the constant surveillance, the threats against their families if they tried to escape. These women testified about what they had endured. And in doing so, they risked everything. Because the people who ran these operations were still out there, still powerful, still connected to police and politicians who protected them. Over the next 10 years, Susana Trimarco became a phantom in Argentina's underworld. She would show up at brothels, posing as a buyer. Traffickers would offer her girls, sometimes as young as 14 years old, for as little as $800. Susana would express interest, gather information, and then report to police. Raids would follow. More women would be freed. Susana rescued more than 100 women this way. She never found Marita, but she found something else. She found evidence of a network so extensive, so deeply rooted in corruption, that dismantling it would require changes at every level of government. The rumors about Marita's location multiplied. Some freed women said they had seen her in different brothels across Argentina. Others said she had been sent to Spain, where Argentine women were being trafficked for European sex markets. One madam was overheard saying, "Those fools are looking for her, and she's in Spain." Susana followed every lead. She traveled across Argentina, confronting traffickers, infiltrating brothels, risking her life repeatedly. She received death threats. People told her they would burn her house down, cut her head off, kill her granddaughter. She kept going. Her husband Daniel couldn't handle it. The stress, the grief, the endless searching with no resolution. He fell into depression. In 2010, 8 years after Marita disappeared, Daniel Verón died. Susana said he died from the pain, from a broken heart that never healed. And still, she kept searching. In 2007, Susana founded the Fundación María de los Ángeles, named after her daughter. The foundation provided resources for trafficking victims, legal assistance, shelter. It became a prominent voice in the fight against human trafficking in Argentina. Susana used her platform to lobby for legislative changes. She demanded that trafficking be recognized as a federal crime, that victims be given protection, that police and politicians involved in the networks be held accountable. Her efforts worked. In 2008, Argentina passed its first national law against human trafficking. The law criminalized trafficking, established penalties for those involved, and created a rescue office to provide assistance to victims. It was a landmark achievement, directly attributable to Susana Trimarco's advocacy. But laws don't bring back missing daughters. And Susana wanted more than legislative victories. She wanted justice for Marita. By 2012, 10 years after Marita's disappearance, investigators had identified 13 suspects connected to her kidnapping, 7 men and 6 women. Among them were the Gomez brothers, Jose and Gonzalo, who ran brothels in Tucumán, Daniela Milhine, and her partner Alejandro Gonzalez, who operated a trafficking house, various other individuals who had facilitated, protected, or profited from the network. The trial began in February 2012 in San Miguel de Tucumán. It was massive, unprecedented in scope. 13 defendants, 8 defense attorneys, more than 130 witnesses. The trial lasted months, dominating Argentine media. The entire country watched. Susana Trimarco testified for days. On February 16, 2012, she stood in that courtroom and confronted the people she believed had taken her daughter. She recounted every detail of her 10-year search. She described what she had learned about the trafficking networks. She accused police, politicians, and judges of complicity and corruption. Witnesses who had been rescued from brothels came forward to testify. More than a dozen women stood in front of their former captors, their rapists, the people who had enslaved them, and described what they had endured. They described seeing Marita Verón. They described her condition, drugged and beaten. They described how she had been moved between locations, always one step ahead of investigators. One woman, identified only as Fatima Mansilla, testified that she had been held captive by Daniela Milhine in 2002. She said she saw Marita Verón in Milhine's house, that Marita was being held there for sexual exploitation. She described the psychological manipulation, the way Milhine controlled women through fear and emotional abuse. The testimony was devastating, detailed, corroborated by multiple witnesses. The evidence seemed overwhelming. And then, on December 11, 2012, the verdict was announced. Not guilty. All 13 defendants. Acquitted. The 3 judges, Alberto Piedrabuena, Emilio Herrera Molina, and Eduardo Romero Lascano, ruled that there was insufficient evidence to prove the defendants had kidnapped Marita Verón or forced her into prostitution. They said the witnesses were unreliable. They said the case was poorly investigated. They said there was no proof. The courtroom erupted. People screamed, cried. The defendants hugged each other, crying tears of relief. Susana Trimarco walked out before the summary was even read, unable to bear it. Outside, across Argentina, the response was immediate and furious. Protests erupted in major cities. Demonstrators smashed windows, set cars on fire. The verdict was seen not just as a miscarriage of justice in one case, but as confirmation of what everyone suspected. The system was corrupt. The traffickers were protected. The victims were expendable. Women's rights organizations mobilized. Anonymous hacker groups published the personal information of the three judges, their addresses, phone numbers, bank statements. The judges were doxxed, threatened, vilified. Within days, impeachment proceedings were initiated against them. The Minister of Security in Tucumán, Mario López Haro, resigned under pressure. President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner called Susana Trimarco personally to express her support. The case became a national scandal, exposing the depth of corruption and complicity that allowed human trafficking to flourish. One detail that emerged during the trial particularly haunted people. One of the defendants had started to confess during the proceedings, but then in a bathroom break, another defendant threatened him, and the confession stopped. Even inside the courtroom, during an active trial, the trafficking network exerted control through intimidation. The Association of Women Judges was the only judicial group that openly condemned the acquittal. Everyone else in the judiciary remained silent, protecting their own. But the public wouldn't let it rest. The outrage was too great. The evidence was too compelling. In December 2013, the Tucumán Supreme Court reviewed the case and partially reversed the decision. A new trial was ordered for 10 of the 13 defendants. In April 2014, those 10 defendants were convicted. The Gomez brothers received 22 years each for kidnapping and sexual exploitation. Daniela Milhine and Alejandro Gonzalez received 18 years. Others received sentences ranging from 10 to 17 years. A police officer named Domingo Andrada got 17 years for his role as an accomplice. The convictions were a victory, partial, incomplete, but still significant. For the first time, traffickers connected to Marita Verón's case were held accountable. The defendants didn't actually go to prison until 2017, after exhausting their appeals, but eventually they were incarcerated. Justice, of a sort, had been achieved. But Marita Verón was still missing. In August 2002, 21 years after Marita disappeared, witnesses came forward with new information. They testified that a folder existed containing photographs of Marita's body, allegedly taken in 2004 at a medical clinic. The images supposedly showed Marita dead, confirming what many had long suspected. The witnesses said this folder was being used as blackmail material by members of a labor union. The photographs were allegedly taken at Luz Medica Clinic, managed by the energy workers union, Luz y Fuerza. The union leader at the time, Julio Luna, was reportedly friends with Ruben Ale, nicknamed La Chancha, the Cheat, a major figure in money laundering and drug trafficking, whom Susana had long accused of orchestrating Marita's kidnapping. Ruben Ale owned the taxi company, Cinco Estrellas, whose logo was on the red car used in Marita's abduction. But he was never charged in connection with Marita's case. He received a house arrest sentence in 2017 for money laundering, nothing more. The existence of these photographs has never been definitively confirmed. Witnesses testified they heard about them, that people talked about them, but no one has produced the actual images. The investigation is ongoing, but as of now, the folder remains a rumor, tantalizing and tragic. Susana Trimarco's lawyers confirmed that according to witness testimony, Marita was last seen alive in 2004. If the photographs exist and show what witnesses claim, then Marita Verón died 20 years ago, possibly murdered to protect the trafficking network, possibly from the cumulative trauma of 2 years in captivity. But without a body, there's no certainty, only terrible, persistent doubt. There are theories about what happened to Marita Verón. None of them bring comfort. The most likely scenario, based on witness testimony and the pattern of her captivity, is that Marita was held in various brothels across northwestern Argentina from April 2002 until sometime in 2004. She was drugged, beaten, and forced into prostitution. Her appearance was altered, her hair dyed, blue contact lenses inserted to make her harder to recognize. She was moved frequently between locations, always staying one step ahead of her mother's search. Witnesses described seeing her in terrible condition, disoriented, drugged, with swollen, vacant eyes. One survivor said Marita had been given cocaine to make her work longer hours, to numb her to the horror of her situation. Another said Marita appeared completely broken, that whatever spark had made her who she was had been extinguished. And then, sometime around 2004, the sighting stopped. No one reported seeing Marita after that year. The most chilling explanation is that she became too recognizable, too much of a liability. Susana Trimarco's campaign had made Marita famous. Her face was on posters across Argentina. Keeping her alive and in circulation became too dangerous for the traffickers. So they may have killed her. Quickly or slowly, we don't know. And they disposed of her body somewhere it would never be found. The photographs allegedly taken in 2004 support this theory. If they exist, if they're real, they represent the final documentation of Marita's life. Her death turned into blackmail material by corrupt union officials and traffickers. But there's another theory, one that some witnesses mentioned, and that Susana has heard whispered for years. That Marita was sent to Spain. That she's alive somewhere in Europe, possibly still trapped in prostitution, possibly having escaped but unable to return home out of fear or shame. This theory gained traction when the Madame Lydia Medina was overheard saying Marita was in Spain. Other freed women testified that Argentine trafficking networks had connections to European operations, particularly in Spain, where demand for young Latin American women was high. If this is true, if Marita is alive in Spain, then she's been missing for 22 years, living under a different identity, possibly traumatized beyond recognition, possibly not even remembering who she was before. It's a theory that offers hope. The possibility that somewhere Marita Verón is breathing, thinking, existing. But it's also a theory that offers profound despair. Because what kind of life would that be? And how would she ever find her way back? Recently, Susana revealed she received information from Paraguay. Someone there claimed to have seen a woman matching Marita's description, living in poverty, eating from trash cans. Susana described it as a dagger to the heart, the possibility that her daughter is alive but destitute, homeless, broken beyond repair. But again, this is unconfirmed. A rumor. A sighting that might be mistaken identity or deliberate deception. The truth is, we don't know what happened to Marita Verón, and that uncertainty is its own kind of torture. The details that haunt this case are the small ones, the things that shouldn't matter but somehow do. The red car with the Cinco Estrellas logo, its owner, Ruben Ale, never faced charges for Marita's kidnapping despite clear connections. The taxi company continued operating. The logo still identifiable on vehicles around Tucumán. A reminder that power protects some people while others disappear. The carpenter who saw something and then vanished. Where did he go? Was he killed to silence him? Did he flee in fear? Or was he paid off, given money to disappear and keep quiet? No one knows. He became another ghost in a case full of them. The nurse, Patricia Soria, who befriended Marita and convinced her to get an IUD at that specific clinic. Was she a recruiter for the trafficking network? Did she specifically target Marita? Or was she genuinely trying to help, and the timing was just horrible coincidence? She was never charged with anything. The investigation couldn't prove direct involvement. Miguel Ardiles, the supposed clinic employee who arranged the appointment. No one at the clinic remembers him working there. No records confirm his employment. Was he even real? Or was he part of the deception, a fake name used by traffickers? The police who found the woman in La Ramada 3 days after Marita's kidnapping and put her on a bus instead of protecting her. Those officers were never identified, never questioned about their decision, never held accountable for potentially re-trafficking a victim. The defendant, who started to confess during the trial and was threatened into silence in a courthouse bathroom. What was he going to say? What information did he have? The threat was successful. He never spoke again. The judges who acquitted all 13 defendants in 2012 despite overwhelming testimony, were they bribed? Threatened? Or did they genuinely believe the evidence was insufficient? The impeachment proceedings against them failed. They kept their positions. They continue to serve as judges in Argentina's legal system.